Hi, and welcome to Storytime with Sean, episode number 4. This time, we'll be reading a story called Nathaniel. There'll be some announcements after the story, so stick around for that. And here it goes. The universe has been described as many things throughout history, such as its own greatest achievement, to things like not the best idea anyone has ever had, and okay from some really disinterested parties. But if there's anything people can agree on about the universe, it's that it's one wacky place. It is wacky in the sense that most anything can happen and will happen. Some people like to call this funny in a cosmic sense, but that typically refers to generally how unfortunate life is for just about everybody. But right here, the way wacky is being used is more to comment on how one day you may run across a planet populated entirely by sentient stable removers, or a moon that has all the pennies you've ever dropped. You know, that kind of wacky. In the same school of thought, there exists a planet populated entirely with skeletons. Like the walking, talking kind of skeletons. These skeletons live out their lives doing pretty normal things, like going to work, talking about how they commute to work, enjoying shows about antiquing, discussing the weather, complaining about how their times keep changing for the worse. Wait a second. These skeletons sound wicked boring. What the hell? How could skeletons go from something so metal to something so suburban soccer mom? Well, funny you should ask that. See, skeletons, unchecked, are a very dangerous group. They will party and pillage and just about destroy everything. So, before the skeletons became too big of a problem for the universe to handle, governments decided to band together and that they needed to do something about the skeletons. After many bloody battles, people had managed to subdue all the skeletons in the known universe and ship them off to a very uninteresting planet. After quite a bit of intense brainwashing and clipping ties onto their little skeleton bodies, they had been made very boring. They were kept boring by being given shows that were just terrible, forced to take jobs like accounting or data entry, and that there was totally no beer at all on the planet. For the safety of the universe, the skeletons were forced to live out their skeletal lives in the lamest way possible. People who became skeletons after this initial setup were just carried off and dropped out of nondescript black spaceships and sent off to their skeleton orientation, where they were made just as boring as all the other skeletons. Nathaniel the skeleton went about his boring skeleton life, hanging out with his skeleton pals and making sure all the funds at the First National Skeleton Bank were all in order. One night, over his warm glass of milk and 6-month-old issue of Reader's Digest, he began to wonder if this was all there was to his bony life. Is this all there really is to my bony life? Something had awoken in Nathaniel, but not in the literal sense, because he didn't have any insides, being an empty skeleton and all. His natural instincts were just telling him to get wild. But years of being dull made him push those feelings aside. It is probably just indigestion. I'll feel better in the morning. He went about his week, doing his dull skeleton job, doing his boring skeleton chores, and having really tiresome conversations with his boring skeleton friends. But each day, the feeling just grew inside him. If this was a montage in a heavy metal music video, the song would be building his intensity as you saw him sitting in his chair, and each day passed, his bony brow would become more furrowed, and his eyes would glow a bit redder. When it came to his book club on Sunday, he just couldn't do it anymore. He slammed his copy of Sensible Finances for the Smart Skeleton, shocking everyone in the room. I dare say I'm sick of this life, Nathaniel cried out. The other skeletons gasped. Jenny spoke up. Nathaniel, are you all right? Maybe you just need a cracker or two. You're probably just hungry. Nathaniel stood up. Come on, we're much more than this. Book clubs, coffee tables, and stamps, all the boring work. We should be doing something else. Pardon my French, but what the heck are you trying to suggest? Steve asked Nathaniel. Nathaniel hadn't really thought that far ahead, which was a rare thing for skeletons, as they always planned way too far in advance. He just was kind of standing over the table with their tea, but his empty eye holes had filled with a red glow, signifying the metalness of his true nature was returning to him. "Oh dear, your eyes," Jenny exclaimed. Nathaniel knew just what he had to do. Let his instincts take over. He stomped a foot through the coffee table, and everyone else in the room screamed. Some even dropped their tea. "Shit, yeah," Nathaniel growled. This was the first time in nearly 1,000 years that any skeleton had heard a swear word. Some even fainted from that. But for all skeletons who wanted to live the simple, boring, and safe life, that time was over. The building around Nathaniel exploded, and when the dust cleared, he was standing on a stage. He had a guitar made out of an axe and a sword smashed together, and he was wearing a sweet red cape, had a mohawk, and a cool crack on his skull. Some of the book club members had become his backup band. The rest were made into moshers, and Jenny was gripping Nathaniel's leg, like on those cool older fantasy movie covers. You know, where somebody's real buff and holding the sword into the sky and has a babe hanging off their leg like she needs rescuing or something. Yeah, just like that. Then Nathaniel grabbed the microphone and shouted, "I am no longer Nathaniel. I am Thigh-Biter the Gnarly, and this is the Trooper!" And the band proceeded to rock out for days after playing that song, and the whole skeleton planet became aware of the power of metal and how fucking cool skeletons can be. They shed their boring lives for cool things like drugs, sex, and rock and roll, obviously. Sadly, they didn't have drugs or booze on their planet. Thigh-Biter finished the days-long set, including a day-long encore, and spoke to his people. "We are bitchin', but we don't have any beer. We need to get off this planet and knock over some liquor stores." Skeletons cheered and clacked their bones in anticipation. Just then, in a room, halfway across the galaxy, an old grizzled general sat in a chair and watched all of this unfold. He lit a cigarette and whispered, "Dear God, the skeletons are back." The end? Hey guys, thanks for listening to Storytime with Sean, episode number 4. The story was Nathaniel. I already said it, but, thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking through to this part. I just wanted to say a couple of things. One, follow me on Twitter. I've got a Twitter. It's at DarksmiterD2. It will be in the link, or in the description. Maybe I'll put an annotation up through the whole video, probably. Click it. Follow me. I'll give updates about what I play and when I do these things. I was thinking about trying to do this more often, because it seems to be the most popular thing. But I also just really enjoy doing it. I want to write more. So this might become a once-a-week show. I guess I don't want to make that promise. So expect them every other week. But if I have a random extra one, don't be surprised. Or just be excited because there's more of it. Other than that, I just wanted to give some shout-outs, I guess, to, in general, Mad Max. Mad Max was a rad movie. I suggest everybody goes sees it. It definitely makes me want to write a funny story that could somehow be like that. And absolutely, I want to give a shout out to Fantasy Fiction, the podcast, even though those guys don't need it at all. They're pretty popular, I'm sure, and, whatever. But I just want to say thanks to those guys, the Josh and Dom running it, because they basically inspired me to do this kind of stuff. I love writing stories, and I think it's funny, and I like to whatever, be goofy. I just want to do sci-fi stuff rather than fantasy. So, shout out to those guys, and if you came from the Fantasy Fic subreddit, because I post these there sometimes, thanks for listening. That's cool. Tell your friends and all that stuff, and leave a comment, like the video, all that kind of YouTube-y crap. Maybe if you have a prompt or a story idea thing, throw it my way, and I'll write that into one of my stories. This is kind of a long outro, but whatever. Thanks for listening. That's pretty much all. And, come back, join me for the next time. See you guys.